I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up,
the difficulties facing indigenous peoples around the world are an affront to dignity and justice.
the UN welcomes indigenous leaders from across the globe as they take on pressing issues impacting their communities.
We are not anti-development, but development must be on our terms and must be just.
From land rights and environmental concerns to preserving language and culture for generations to come.
We have the right to participate in the decisions in all spheres in each country.
A look at the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Next.
Indigenous peoples from around the world have spent the past 2 weeks at UN headquarters for the annual Forum on Indigenous Issues. This year, the gathering focused on implementing UN declarations on indigenous rights. There are an estimated 476 million indigenous people living in some 90 countries around the world. The forum puts a spotlight on the challenges those communities face and addresses potential solutions.
The individual and collective rights of indigenous peoples are non-negotiable. Now and forever, we stand with you all. Now and forever, we stand with you all in making those rights a reality for indigenous peoples everywhere.
Secretary General Antonio Guterres opened the 2025 Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples with a call for action, urging governments to honor obligations outlined in the UN's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That declaration recognizes injustices indigenous cultures have suffered and acknowledges their right to self-determination, as well as the importance of maintaining their lands, languages, and culture. During the Permanent Forum, delegates examined progress made in 6 key areas: economic and social development, culture, environment, education, health, and human rights. Here's Aluki Kutuk, chair of this year's forum.
We have come far, but the road ahead remains long. UNDRIP is not a document to be celebrated once a year. It is a living framework that must guide how we govern, how we invest, and how we treat one another on the shared Mother Earth. Its full and effective implementation is not optional. It is a moral, legal, and collective obligation.
This year's Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues included discussions on women. Women of indigenous descent face higher rates of poverty and illiteracy than their non-indigenous counterparts.
We are here because indigenous women are demanding to be heard and heeded. And their message is very clear. We will not build a sustainable world by excluding the very women who have sustained it for generations. We cannot claim progress on SDG 5 until indigenous women and girls see their rights upheld, their knowledge valued, and their futures protected.
The future depends on the leadership of indigenous women and our knowledge. We are the keepers of tradition and the architects of change and peace building. We are traditional healers spanning through generations. We must prioritize capacity building, mentorship, and policy reforms that elevate indigenous women into decision-making positions locally, nationally, and globally.
Indigenous people make up more than 40% of Bolivia's population. I sat down with Bolivia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Celinda Sosa Lunda. Minister, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about Bolivia's message to the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues at the United Nations.
It has been 18 years since the declaration in favor of indigenous peoples. We believe that this agenda really needs to be strengthened so that indigenous peoples would not be the only ones in this forum who can discuss, but rather to ensure that the proposals and strategies of indigenous peoples are truly reflected in many policies and programs. For example, within COP30, because several COPs have been held up to this point, and we continue to see that Indigenous peoples have not had a very important role to play. We consider that Indigenous peoples have made progress. Bolivia has at least been a driving force of various resolutions and proposals to recognize Indigenous peoples. But we see that there are still states, there are countries, where although they have made a commitment at the United Nations, they have not yet translated that into policy. While in Bolivia, it is recognized in the political constitution of the state and other laws that are binding on the rights of Indigenous peoples. So we hope that in this space, at this summit, of this meeting of Indigenous peoples, we can see results, and the results are binding on states and countries. That way, these results will be truly on the agenda, not only recognizing the rights of Indigenous peoples, but rather assuming responsibility for the fact that Indigenous peoples also have rights to a social life or a cultural life. We have the right to participate in the decisions in all spheres in each country.
Everyone around the world is experiencing record-breaking temperatures, seeing more extreme storms. Can you tell us more about the impact of climate change on Indigenous populations and what you have experienced, what you've seen from when you were a young girl to what you see today?
I really realize that it's changed a lot from what it used to be before to what it is now. Now we have droughts or heavy rains that often destroy crops and affect the small plots of land because the flooding of the rivers is too much. We used to have springs to get water, but now these springs no longer have water. Or we have many hailstorms that also destroy production. We have early frosts that destroy production as well. So climate change, the climate crisis, of course it has a big impact. Who is most affected? It's especially the poorest people. And among the poorest are women, because women are those of us who remain in the countryside, in the indigenous villages. It is they who are truly us who suffer most from the consequences of the climate crisis. And that is why, from the Forum of Indigenous Communities, we have to demand, we have to insist that in all the spaces, that when discussing the climate crisis, let these agendas and proposals truly become a reality. Indigenous peoples are protectors of forests. We are guardians of the rivers because we are the ones who are close to them. Of water, we are those who are close to nature. In other words, breathing oxygen and pure air is very healthy. But it is sad when we see forests and biodiversity are being burned. So it's very important. Above all, I am calling for women to play a role in decision-making, a role in involvement in the decision and in the implementation of these policies. Because until now, women are aware of these policies, but we are not involved in these decisions. So I think that it is very important that those of us who live with the consequences of the climate crisis should also have a voice and a presence in these decision-making spaces.
Minister, you just spoke about Indigenous women. You are the foreign minister of a South American country. You're also an Indigenous leader, and you're also a woman. Tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you faced and what advice you have for other Indigenous young girls and women who want to accomplish the things that you have.
That we have to be active within the agenda and the demands for our rights, and above all, the defense of women's demands. Although we have made progress, we still have a long way to go. Today, women still do not exercise our full rights as established in the United Nations Declaration, and many times of the laws in our country.
Minister Celinda Sosa Lunda, thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at some of the other issues on the UN's agenda.
The humanitarian situation throughout the Gaza Strip has gone from bad to worse to beyond imagination. For nearly 2 full months, Israel has blocked food, fuel, medicine, and commercial supplies, depriving more than 2 million people of life-saving relief, all while the world watches. I am alarmed by statements by Israeli government officials about the use of humanitarian aid as a tool for military pressure. Aid is non-negotiable.
Secretary General Antonio Guterres called on Israel to allow aid into Gaza and pushed for a two-state solution. Guterres is urging both Israel and Hamas to return to a ceasefire and release all hostages. Millions of people in Myanmar are still in need, 1 month after devastating earthquakes shook the country. Many are still without adequate shelter.
Refugee receiving countries are making the right decision. They are doing their part. We, the humanitarians, are on the ground doing our part. You must be more committed and more united to do yours.
Filippo Grandi, the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees, called on the Security Council to do more to end conflicts and support refugees. More than 122 million people were forcibly displaced in 2024.
Coming up.
My actions are truly based on the political conviction that I am Aruaca, I am indigenous, I am from the Sierra Nevada, and I am Colombian.
UN Insider.
He can hold him guns. Word protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Leonora Zalabata has served as Colombia's ambassador to the UN since 2022. She's the first Indigenous woman to represent her country at the UN. I sat down with her to discuss some of the issues on the agenda during the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Ambassador, let's begin with the theme of the event. What are the best practices and challenges, and what do you hope to accomplish?
This session of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues plays a very important role. When analyzing the implementation of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, it is a step forward for states to really know the status of those rights declared by the United Nations, to invite and encourage them to truly implement and apply the United Nations resolution, in this case, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, because that adds, it does not subtract or divide.
La resolución de Naciones Unidas, en este caso la Declaración de los Pueblos, porque eso suma no resta ni divide.
It helps to ensure that the proposals we have for the future are truly viable and that we can implement other issues such as the SDGs or the 2030 Agenda.
A mantenerlas realmente vivas y poder implementar otros asuntos como los ODS o los a la Agenda 2030.
Can you talk about some of the achievements over the years? And do you feel the forum has been successful in advancing Indigenous rights?
Creo que Naciones Unidas supo defender.
I believe that the United Nations knew how to defend those rights that are not only individual, but also collective.
Y ha sido muy importante que se haya creado el
The creation of the Indigenous Peoples Forum has been very important because it has truly succeeded in integrating sectors of humanity, such as Indigenous peoples, who are collective entities and whose fundamental rights are fundamental rights.
Los derechos fundamentales de los pueblos indígenas.
The right to territory, the right to have a language, the right to have a culture, and rights that are established for any society or human being.
Una cultura.
And I believe that in this regard, the forum is successful, important, and necessary.
Sociedad o ser humano. Y creo que en eso el foro es exitoso, es importante, es necesario.
What are you hearing from the younger generation, young Indigenous people, about the challenges they face today? And what are you telling them?
Sería muy interesante tener un diálogo con jóvenes indígenas.
It would be very interesting to have a dialogue with Indigenous youth because the history and evolution of Indigenous cultures have been very significant. Today, Indigenous people maintain our languages, but we have also had the opportunity to be bilingual from childhood and have been able to progress without abandoning our roots, which are tied to the land and to natural spaces. We have also been able to grow up alongside other cultures that are different from our own. I believe that Indigenous youth today are evolving without abandoning their roots. My recommendation would be that without abandoning their roots, we can grow and coexist with other worlds.
Está evolucionando sin dejar sus raíces, y las recomendaciones que yo le haría era que sin dejar sus raíces podamos crecer, podamos convivir con otros mundos.
And to that, what about the role of technology and what it does in helping or hurting preserve culture and language?
La tecnología bien usada es buena. La tecnología mal usada.
Technology, when used well, is good. Technology, when used poorly, destroys us. However, technology is a subject that can be a source of strength for everyone, that can help us. What is bad is that not all of us have the right to equal access to its correct and appropriate use, that we do not have public awareness of how to use technology, and that it can be destructive. But for any culture, technology can strengthen our peoples internally, and it can also weaken them, depending on how we look at it. Technology can represent what Indigenous languages do, expressing what we carry inside and what we think.
Lo miremos. La tecnología puede representar lo que hace el lenguaje o los idiomas indígenas, expresar lo que llevamos por dentro y lo que pensamos.
Ambassador, you are the first Indigenous woman to represent Colombia at the United Nations as a permanent representative. What has that meant to you, and how has your background helped what you were trying to accomplish at the United Nations?
Pienso que es una decisión que se la debemos.
I think it is a decision we owe to President Gustavo Petro, President of Colombia.
Él quiso.
He wanted to show the world that Colombia is a multi-ethnic, multicultural, and pluricultural country. And I think that is where we are right now. My actions are truly based on the political conviction that I am Aruaca, I am Indigenous, I am from the Sierra Nevada, and I am Colombian. I believe that this Indigenous spirit keeps us constantly engaged in a personal dynamic of participation, conviction, and defense of what we have, our territories, and our cultures.
En una dinámica personal de participación, de convicciones, de defender lo que tenemos, nuestros territorios, nuestras culturas.
Ambassador Leonora Zalabata, thank you for joining us.
Muchas gracias.
Coming up.
We are fighting for the causes that we have as Indigenous peoples.
UN Insider.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
The UN is encouraging more participation from young people to help tackle the world's issues, and Indigenous youth made their voices heard, as well as their elders.
My name is Cantuta Conde. I'm from the Chuquiagomarca, from the Aymara Nation in Bolivia. I'm part of the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. We are a group that works within the United Nations Permanent Forum of Indigenous Issues that has been recognized as an observer group that can make recommendations for global indigenous youth.
Mi nombre es Kazak.
My name is Kazak. I am the General Coordinator of COPNET, the Binational Coordinating Committee of the Achua Nation of Ecuador and Peru. I'm here today to say, in front of the United Nations, that good practices are not being applied.
As Indigenous youth, we are fighting for the causes that we have as Indigenous peoples. So when we reunite as Indigenous youth, it's not only for us as children, as youth, and as adolescents, but it's also to make strength to the power that our elders have done.
Before Indigenous peoples go into the UN meeting rooms to meet with states, we always gather ahead of time. We exchange information and we develop strategies in our statements before we go into the room with states. We make sure that Indigenous peoples are unified and we're all on common ground. I've been to every single permanent forum from 2002 to the present. My role at the beginning was to organize the Indigenous caucus. We make sure that we had a statement, a joint statement from Indigenous people supporting the Permanent Forum and what we want the Permanent Forum to do.
Nuestro territorio prácticamente es intacto.
Our land remains largely intact, with virgin forests on both sides, Ecuador and Peru. Nevertheless, we have threats and we protect it according to our needs and traditions.
Lo protegemos. Hay mucha gente que desconoce.
Many people do not truly understand the meaning of the forest and the rainforest. They don't understand the value of nature.
Significa la selva.
What we do is to bring all of the consultations that we have done in our communities, but also to return that back. We need to spread the word about the human rights mechanisms that are for Indigenous youth, especially for Indigenous peoples.
There's a lot of initiatives in the United Nations that are started here at the Permanent Forum that go up the ladder to ECOSOC and then up to the General Assembly.
Everything that we're learning today in New York during the Permanent Forum, the objective of us coming here is to return that to our community in our languages with the community radios that spread all of this information.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is a special edition of UN Insider.
UN Insider serves as an important window for the global audience to better understand multilateral diplomacy.
It's very important for the media to cover the United Nations, to seek to understand and tell the story in ways that the average person in the street can understand.
I think it's very important that the media should contribute to conveying important messages about the reality of today's challenges.
UN Insider has come to the UN, and we at the UN are so grateful to have it here. It is the only dedicated TV program to what is happening in the UN, and it is reaching so many people with, as it says in its title, inside the UN stories.
Media plays an important role in providing objective information across the world.
We think that media has a strong power of uplifting, what we are trying to convey as messages as developing countries.
We need the mobilization of all peoples, of whole government and whole of society, and media can help us to be informed so that we also can make our part.
I think the media is fundamental to enable citizens across the world, first of all, to understand what is the rationale of having the United Nations. It's not that there is one place on planet Earth that will tell the rest of the world what to do. It is a much more complex story.